One day, Jesus was teaching, and Jesus, because he was such a good teacher, he's attracting a crowd that's coming around him, and the crowd is just like moving in. And we see this all throughout the scriptures, this sort of picture. So maybe it's a house, and maybe that house is absolutely packed. You know, people are climbing in through windows trying to hear him. People are all around the place. They're just everywhere. And can you sort of imagine what that would look like? And so as we're thinking about this, and you kind of see the picture of this, someone comes up and interrupts Jesus. And I just want you to imagine what it must be like to interrupt Jesus in the middle of his teaching. Excuse me, Jesus, could you stop for a minute? I know you have something very important to say. I need to interrupt you. And this person looks at Jesus and says, Jesus, your mothers and your brother, or your mothers, your mother and your brothers are outside, and they can't get in. The crowd is too thick. They want to talk to you, and they can't get through. I just wanted to let you know. And Jesus responds to this interruption, to the news of his mother and his brothers dropping in on him in a way that we don't expect at all. I mean, it's weird, and honestly, it sounds at first a little cruel. And this is what Jesus says. Jesus replied, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking at those who sat around him, he said, "Here are my mother and brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." Now, I thought about this, and I'm thinking about this right now because my mom is right over here. My beautiful mother is hanging out right here, and you guys know I love my mom. I spent Friday with my mom running errands together. We got to take a little candy back because we didn't use all of our candy because people bought so much candy, so we took some candy back, and we were doing some other errands. We got to eat, breakfast together, spend time together. Guys, I think you know I absolutely adore my mother. I love my mom. But I want you to imagine a scene for a minute at my house. You guys know we like to have a lot of parties at our house. And I want you to imagine that we're having a party at the house, and somebody comes up to me and they say, "Ryan, your mom just pulled up and she can't get in. She can't come through, so what do you want to do?" "Who's that lady?" I respond to you. You go, "Your mother. She gave birth to you. She lives down the street. You take care, you know your mother." And I look at you and I go, "Who is my mother?" And you say, "Are you feeling okay?" And then I look at you and I say this cryptic thing at you. I look at you and I go, "Here are my mothers and brothers." And you guys start to say, "Guys, we need to call somebody." And then I say, "My mothers and my brothers and my sisters, and those are these people, whoever does the will of God." You would look at me like, "What are you doing?" And then you'd say, "Kathy, you can come over to my place for a little bit. We'll spend time together, and you take care of my mom for me." Because you'd think, "Man, that just seems harsh." So we have to kind of wrestle with that and go, what is Jesus doing here? And why is the author telling us this story? Well, sometimes what happens in here is that this gets read as Jesus rejecting his family. And I want to tell you that's not what's happening here. Again, when we tell these stories, a lot of the time the authors are telling these stories in ways they want to get your attention. Remember, these are letters that are being written or books that are being written that are being read aloud to entire groups of people. So when you open the book of Mark, you're most likely reading it to an entire group of people gathered to hear the story of Jesus all the way through. So as you're reading this very long story, you don't want somebody to fall asleep halfway through. So you have to find places that cause people to sit up and go, "Whoa, what just happened? I dozed off there for a second. What did Jesus just do?" And that's sort of what happens here because these are good writers. These are people who understand what it means to write good literature. And so they're writing this story in a way that kind of gets your attention because if they're going to get your attention, now they're going to give you a point that Jesus is making. He wasn't replacing his family. He wasn't rejecting his family. He's about to do something here that would have been abnormal and unexpected in the first century world. he is expanding the definition of family. He wasn't excluding anybody, he was actually including everyone else in the definition of family. And this was a huge deal. And it's hard to see at first, but let me show you how he's doing it and why this is so critical. The first thing, we have to understand something about family in the first century world. So your family in the first century world wasn't just who you loved and the people that you lived with. It wasn't just that those people that were, you thought of as your family. That wasn't the idea here. It wasn't just who you loved and who you lived with. That wasn't the only thing. Your family was everything. Your family wasn't just the people that maybe you had meals with. Your family wasn't just the people that you were born into. Your family was everything to you. Your family was your entire social safety net. Your family was your dependence for economic survival. Your family determined everything about your social standing, your access to resources. Your family represented your protection from violence. Your family was your identity. So, to be without family in the ancient world was to be among the most vulnerable people. If you didn't have family, you had nothing. Now, this is why there are so many commands throughout the Bible that instruct the care of the widow and the orphan. And we find this over and over and over again, because without having family, without anybody to support them, they have nothing. Now, we are starting to get a picture of this reality in our own communities. We're watching the cruelty of removing the safety net of society. And those without any support systems are falling through the cracks. I saw this post yesterday. I thought, man, this was really powerful. So I want to share this. This is just an aside that goes with this. It said, what a country to live in where tonight we'll have all of our kids go to each other's houses in our neighborhoods to get candy from our neighbors who don't want to give food to children starving. That was powerful. What would it look like if we just had Halloween every day and we didn't have to dress up and we could just, go around the neighborhood and support each other and care for each other? That's what it's supposed to look like. That's what the world is supposed to be. We are supposed to care for our neighbors. We're supposed to be worried about the people who are hurting around us. And we should be worried about it from a micro position of what can I do for my neighbors, but we also need to move it into a macro position of what can we do for each other. That should be the natural place that we live, the natural place that we're at. So anyways, because of this though, we kind of have this picture of what's going on. Why is Jesus talking about this? Because Jesus is making a shift. He sees the hurt. He sees what we're seeing around us. And he says what we should be saying is, maybe it's about time we expand the definition of family. Maybe we stop having family be this idea of what's good for me and my stuff isn't good enough for everybody else because I got to worry about my thing. He's saying, no, you need to worry about each other. This is what made the whole church so dynamic and so different, because they actually took this to heart. They realized that following Jesus meant caring about each other. And people looked and said, well, that looks different. I think I'd like to be a part of that. What if we looked like that? What if we did that? So Jesus shifts family away from those in the same household and says, guys, what if? He looks at these people, he says, what if? What if family wasn't just the same people in the same household, but what if we shifted it to the possibility of family being all of us? Wouldn't that change everything? Jesus wasn't narrowing the circle by leaving out his family. He wasn't doing that. He was using something that caused people to go, whoa, to widen the circle. He was saying that belonging to this new way of life wasn't just about bloodline. This is a powerful shift that helps us rethink family. It helps us welcome others into the expansive picture that Jesus was painting with his words. It's the reason we talk around here about it. It's a lot more fun to tear down big wooden fences and use that wood to build big tables, because that's the kind of place we need to be. Building more chairs, building more tables, welcoming people into this thing that we call the family of God. We're going to get to that all the way in a couple weeks. We're going to celebrate it at Friendsgiving, which I think is pretty cool. But we need to first reckon with this idea of the family we received. We need to reckon with the idea of the family that we didn't choose, the family we were born into, adopted into, or fostered into. Because this is the family that shaped us before we had any say in the matter. Because we don't choose our family of origin, we receive it. Now, that idea is alluded to in a well-known set of verses that says this: "For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." I want you to hear this incredible poem, this song is what this is. These are lyrics. "For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I'm fearfully and I'm wonderfully made." Now again, I said that this was poetry, this is a song, because it's important for us to understand that the author writing these words was a poet, writing a poem or a song. This passage ends up getting used by people a lot of ways, but its intention is as a poem or a song to do what poems or songs are meant to do, which is to put into words something hard to understand. I have 2 children. And friends, I know how children are made. We don't need to talk about that. It's not what this discussion is. But saying that, I really don't understand how children are made. It's a mystery. It's a beautiful mystery. It's an unbelievable reality that's hard to even begin to comprehend, isn't it? There's something mysterious, there's something beautiful, there's something surreal. All of life is like this. Think of all the reality of what humanity is, and think about this person as he's recognizing and thinking about life. Maybe he's holding his child, maybe he's thinking about his own parents, maybe he's thinking about his life, maybe he's thinking about others, maybe he's seen kids leave a room and he's going, man, there is something miraculous and amazing and incredible and complex about all of this. And that was what the author was doing. He was leaning into the mystery of life that is still a mystery for most of us today. What the author was doing is suggesting in a very poetic way that God was somehow present. God was somehow present in your formation, present in that complex interweaving of genetics that comes about because of the circumstances and choices of people who brought you into existence, that somehow God is amid that. And the psalmist says, I don't know. This is mysterious. This is awe-inspiring. This is crazy. I can't even comprehend this at all. And he calls it wonderful. He just calls it wonderful. But then I looked at what he was addressing, and I thought what he doesn't address is that while that mystery might be wonderful, he doesn't address the people who conceived us. Maybe they're not so wonderful. To put it another way, just because we are fearfully and wonderfully made doesn't mean our family was fearfully and wonderfully functioning. But I think that's where a lot of us get stuck when we talk about family. This is particularly true for anyone who grew up in church, and even more so evangelical or conservative church. For that person to be honest about the struggles of their family of origin is seen as disrespectful. It can be seen as harmful to family legacy. It can even be seen as ungrateful. And so families will do everything they can to sweep things under the rug, to hide stuff, to protect family. And that's harmful to people. And if you've been through that, it's okay. You can be in a safe place where you can talk about the harm and the hurt, and you can talk about dysfunction. Now, the reason that in some conservative and evangelical places that this happens is because of a few different Bible passages that get taken out of context. And so these Bible passages end up getting used to control or to harm or even manipulate people to not be honest about their family of origin. Now, one of those passages is found in a letter that was written to a church in a city called Ephesus. And the author was addressing some very complicated first century dynamics. So he was speaking into some things that were very specific to first century dynamics as people gathered together in each other's homes. And he was talking about the relationships inside these families and navigating some of the context that they had. As he was doing that and addressing those complicated first century dynamics, he said this about one aspect of family that ends up getting used all the time to tell people you can't be honest about your family of origin. Now, before we go too far, I don't want this to feel depressing, because I know this can feel depressing. What I want to make sure we do first is I want people to know you're seen. If you have hurt in your family of origin, you are seen. If you need to take a break and you need to get out for a little bit, take a breather. It's okay. Nobody's going to look at you. Nobody's going to think you're upset. It's fine. Everybody needs space. For others of us, we say, what's the big deal? My family was great. That is good for you. But you need to know what it's like for people who didn't have that experience so that you know how to support and love them, because you, by being here, you're their family now. So this is for all of us, some of us to learn what it means to recognize that people didn't have a great experience. For others, to recognize that it's okay that you are seen because you had a bad experience. And for others of us, it's complicated and you probably had a little bit of both and you're even more of a mess. Therapists, my friends, correct? Yes. Okay. Let's listen to this passage and then we'll go further on. Listen to this. So Paul's talking. He writes this letter. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment, with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Now, the first thing about this is I need to tell you something about my dad. Because my dad used to say something that sounds a lot like this verse, which was something like, I brought you into this world, and I can take you out of it. And you know, I wish my dad was still here for a lot of reasons, because I just miss my dad because I love him. But I wish my dad was here for this sermon, because I wish I could look at him right now and say, Dad, you definitely played a part in that, but I realized that my mother worked a lot harder to bring me into this world. I am pretty certain you were eating a candy bar and watching Wheel of Fortune or something when I was born. What was it? Wheel of Fortune? No. Match Game. What was it? Match Game. He's not here to defend himself. It's okay. He was watching Match Game and eating a candy bar. Now, admittedly, this is a long time ago. I'm old. They didn't necessarily let my father in the room, but he probably should have been on his hands and knees praying instead of enjoying Match Game. No, I love my dad. I love my dad. I love my dad. And I'm so thankful for my parents. If you guys don't mind for a minute, I want to tell you that my dad was probably the best person, best human that I have ever known. I've talked about this a lot. I've used our church as some therapy sessions sometimes publicly to share the incredible example he was in my life. And so when I think about him, I think about a lot of his life, and I think about particularly his example and the example that he gave me. And friends, I want to tell you something cool. That's what this verse is about. Listen, children, obey your parents. Obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother. Now listen what he does here, which is the first commandment with a promise. And then he goes on, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Now, Paul, who's the author of these words, what he's saying is, I'm not inventing this idea. He's saying, I didn't invent the idea of honoring your parents. What he does is, this is a direct quote. This is him citing his sources and saying, if you look back, you'll find that there's a commandment that was given with 9 other famous commandments that we call the 10 Commandments. And he said, this commandment is found in there. And he said, and this one has a promise. He says, if you honor your father and your mother, that it may go well with you and you may enjoy long life on the earth. Now, knowing that he is quoting this, knowing that he is taking this passage and he is telling this people, here is a direct quote, it is responsible for us then to go back to the original context, see the quote there, and figure out what is Paul talking about and how in the world does this apply to us in our discussion of our family of origin. If we go back, we find it. Deuteronomy 5:16, in the middle of the Ten Commandments. Honor your father and mother, as the Lord your God commanded you, so that your days may be long, and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Now, the context of the Ten Commandments, the context of this is Moses giving these commandments to the Israelites right before they entered the Promised Land. Now, the order of these commandments is fascinating. We could do an entire series on it. The commandments start with their relationship with God. Don't have other gods, don't make idols, don't misuse God's name, keep the Sabbath. So they're all about this, like, keep these relationships right with God. Then he shifts to now you have to have relationships with other people. How do you do some of those things? And here's what's remarkable about this. Before he gets to murder, adultery, theft, or lying, the very first command he goes into about human relationships is family. It's this one. Honor your father and your mother, as the Lord your God commanded you, so that your days may be long and that it may go well with you in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Now look at the promise. The promise is that it would go well with them in the land where they were going. And at first, that seems dependent on them listening to whatever their fathers and their mothers had to tell them, right? If you listen to mom and dad and do what they tell you to do, it will go fine with you in the land you're going into. But that understanding of this passage is problematic and makes zero sense because Moses wasn't speaking to those adults. He wasn't speaking to the children with their adults present and having, like, if we had our kids come back here and I looked at them and I said, now guys, you listen to mom and dad so it may go well in the land that you're going into, whatever that looks like. That's not what Moses is doing at all. That's not the context. Moses was actually speaking to people whose parents no longer were in their lives speaking to them. This wasn't about people learning from their parents' words. It was actually about the people learning from their parents' stories. Let me explain this. See, their parents were the ones who God rescued from slavery in Egypt. But despite God's intervention in their lives, they failed to trust God over and over and over again. Now, because of this, and this is where this gets amazing, the journey from Egypt to the Promised Land should have taken like 2 weeks, maybe 3, maybe 4 if they stopped at all the Buc-ee's along the way. But it should have been a short trip. It was not, guys. The trip that should have taken 4 weeks took 40 years. Now, as a result, the next generation, I want you to think about this. The next generation spent their entire childhoods wandering the desert instead of living in the Promised Land. So then Moses comes and says, you need to honor your parents. And they say, really? My parents that can't even read a map. You want me to honor my... Now, I have experience with this. Guys, I'm going to tell on my parents again. We went on a trip. And my mother says, we need a vacation. Get the credit cards. This was not good. This was not teaching us anything good. We get the credit cards. We're going on a trip. Where are we going? I don't know. We're just going. I'm serious. So we got in the car and we drove. We just drove. And we drove out east. And we decided that we were just going to kind of find our way along the way. There were no cell phones. You printed off directions on MapQuest. You didn't have MapQuest at this point. You just picked up a map along the way. One of the things that we did was we got to New York City. And here's big old New York City. My dad's like, you know what we should do? We should go into New York City. And then we'll go to Brooklyn, we'll go on Long Island, and you can see the house that I lived in. That sounds amazing, Dad. Let's do that. We spend the next 3 hours circling New York City because my father couldn't get the car into the lane that would allow us to go into the city. And all he kept yelling was, they're not letting me in, they're not letting me in. And my teenage sister and me are yelling at him, not honoring him at all, because we're like, you're ruining our lives. All we want to see is New York City, and you don't know how to drive a car. That is exactly what's going on here. These people are sitting here going, I could have spent my life with milk and honey. Instead, I was eating manna and water from a rock because you guys suck. And this is like every generation. Isn't this what we do? Gen Z is like, millennials, you're so dumb. Yeah, well, you guys laugh about 6, 7, okay? Stop. At least we laughed about inappropriate numbers, okay? Let's just be honest. Like, we were real. And then, don't laugh, though, because then Gen X is looking at millennials and Gen Z, and they're like, you guys are so dumb. You guys are so stupid. We were so much cooler. Gen X had everything, didn't it, Kurt? Gen X had it all. And then boomers look at Gen Xers and go, slackers. Slackers, look at you guys. And then we look at boomers and go, well, you guys ruined everything. Retire. Stop running the government. Retire. Enjoy your life, please. See, do you see the generational warfare that takes place in our lives? I want you to imagine the generational warfare taking place at this point. So, long story short, this passage is people going, how do I honor my parents when they screwed up? How do I honor my parents when they were a mess? How do I honor my parents when they made so many mistakes that caused my childhood to be a complete disaster? How do I honor my parents? Well, that's exactly what this whole thing is about. When they were told to honor their parents, they did exactly that by not ignoring their parents' mistakes, but learning from them. That's how they honored their parents. Listen to the passage. Listen to this again. This is so cool. And then we're gonna get to where all this ties in. Honor your father and mother as the Lord God commanded you, so that your days may be long, and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Now, here's one of those really cool places, and I have my friend Dan to thank for this as he helped me think about this piece. The Hebrew word translated here as honor is kavod. And this is such a cool word. And man, when we started talking about this, I was like, oh, this is so brilliant. This is exactly what we need to talk about. The word literally means heavy. Like heavy, like weight, like weighty, like meaningful because it's heavy. But I want us to think about that in terms of not the psychological heaviness, though that's going to play into this. I want us to also just think about honoring as an object of heaviness. And here's how I want us to think about it. I want you to imagine, our kids are learning about this too today. I want you to think about a balance scale. You guys know everybody know what a balance scale is? So a balance scale is what they used in like the ancient world. And we see it in halls of justice today, right? It's this, okay? On one side, you put weights, right? Those weights are balancing out the other thing on the other side. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get them in balance so that you can weigh the one side with the other. And if you don't weigh the other side with the other side, you end up missing what you're trying to measure. Okay? That's exactly why this word here being used is so beautiful. If you ignore one side, the scale goes out of balance. The weight on both sides of the scale matters, and that's what we're seeing here. As the next generation told their parents' story, here's what they did. They gave weight to both sides of the story, not just the good parts. And you go, they did? Yeah. It's why you have the Bible. Friends, this is what the Bible is. These stories eventually formed this thing that we have called the Bible. It was literally these children growing up telling stories about their parents, the good and the bad. Doing just what I did with my parents, telling the good and the bad, sharing the things that formed them for good, and then also sharing the bad things that they did. They didn't ignore this. And what's cool about that is that became par for the course for the Bible. So that when people began to share stories, they shared the good things and they shared the bad things. They weighed them together, and that is how they honored them. And they did this. They reflected on the whole story, not to ridicule them. It wasn't to ridicule them. It was to learn from them. And it was so that their grandchildren and their grandchildren and their grandchildren could learn from them. Put another way, honoring isn't about looking for the good while ignoring the mistakes. Honoring is about reflecting on all of it. It's about seeing the whole story, what they gave, what they couldn't give, what they left or what they stole, what they got right and what they got wrong. And that isn't disrespectful, harmful, or ungrateful. It's even better. It's honest. And it actually honors the people of the past. Friends, let me put it this way. People aren't honored by legacies reimagined into an untrue story. People aren't honored when we make up things about people that aren't true, especially in history. They're honored when they're not forgotten, received for who they were, not who we wish they had been. Now, we're currently debating this, I think, in our own country with our kids and their educations, telling them they should learn the whole story, not just part of the story, right? So we can learn from the good and the bad. That's the beauty of the American experiment. Let me just go off for just a second. Can I, please? I won't put it in the podcast. It's just for you guys. That's the beauty of the American experiment, is learning from the mistakes of those who came before us so we can do better, because we're supposed to do better. And if that's true for that, it should also be true for our families. It's working through a complicated inheritance that makes us better on the other side. Not being bound by the failures, but learning from the whole story. So when we talk about family given, when we're talking about family givenness, we're talking about with being honest, about naming what we received and what it means to honestly reckon with it today. So here's where this comes together. Some of you received healthy roots. Your family showed you what it means to feel worthy, to belong. Your family showed you faith, maybe kindness, courage, resilience. That is a blessing. Name it as a blessing. Some here, some of you all, you received wounds. Your family made you earn your place, and you still haven't earned it. They might have been absent, neglectful, controlling. Maybe they didn't see you, or if they did see you, they rejected the thing that they saw. That is a wound, and it can be named as a wound. And some here, maybe most here, received healthy roots and painful wounds. And that's probably the most difficult inheritance to name. But here's what I want to say to you. No matter where you are on the spectrum, it is true for everyone here that family shaped you before you could shape yourself. And one of the healthiest things that you can do is discover how to untangle that inheritance. But many of us are afraid to do it. We're afraid. We're afraid of what that means or what it would look like. So let's go back to the text one more time. And I want you to see why this process is so important, why this sermon, why we have to start here. Honor your father and mother, as the Lord your God commanded you, so that you may be long, so your days may be long, and may go well with you in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Remember, guys, the people who told these stories, they walked into the promised land, and they would eventually take what they learned from their parents, and they would pass it on to the next generation. And the next generation would take what they learned from them, and they would pass it on to the next generation. And they would pass it on to the next generation, and the next generation, and on and on and on. Now, here's what's amazing about this. Along the way, as we read the scriptures, we find that sometimes the lessons were learned. Sometimes they were forgotten. Oftentimes, it was because the people, just like many generations in our world, failed to learn from the past and are doomed to repeat it. But here's why we can learn from this and how this applies to our lives and what we see from these people in Scripture and how this works for us. The more honest that we can be about what we have received, the more intentional we can be about what we pass along. Friends, I'm going to speak specifically to those of you who are raising children in your home. Because this is the battle. It's not easy. I have friends who have teenagers, and we talk all the time that nobody told me this was going to be this hard. But here's what I know. If I'm not honest with what I received, then I'm not going to be intentional about what I'm passing along to them. Right? But if I'm honest about what I have received, then I can be more intentional about what I pass along to them. Now, this applies to all kinds of areas of life. Every single area you can think of in your life about being an adult, growing up, doing things, being a person of love, being a person of grace, being a person who understands how to work your finances, being a person who has responsibilities, being a person who's respectful. All of these things, if I don't look and see what I received, good or bad, I won't be intentional about the way that I pass it along to others. Does that make sense? Okay, and then here's why this isn't just for those who are raising kids. The reality is that all of us will become someone else's family. Whether by blood or by choice or by the interweaving of our lives because of faith, the exact same thing that Jesus was talking about, we are all going to shape someone. And the more honest we are about what shaped our lives, both the healthy roots and the painful wounds, the more intentional and more aware we can be in how we are shaping other people, how we're treating other people, how we're welcoming other people into our community. And here's the promise that we find in what Jesus says. You don't have to do it on your own. You don't have to do that work on your own. You don't have to untangle all this garbage on your own because you belong to a new family. The family that Jesus described as a spiritual family, made up of brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers. And over the next few weeks, we're going to see how that family will help us navigate the struggles that every one of us has, especially when it comes to relationships with our families of origin. And here's what we're going to see, because here's the little teaser of what's coming. We are going to see that through the support of that spiritual extended family that every one of us has been given, the wisdom of mental health professionals and experts, many who sit with us in this room every single week, and most of all, the courage to be honest with ourselves that we can find healing, we can find wholeness, and we can find peace. Let's pray. God, we are thankful to be in a place that is safe, to be in a place where it is okay to talk about the difficult stuff. God, that we are in this place where we can navigate challenges, where we can talk about what is hard, where we can wrestle with these things. Where it's okay to not have it all together, where it's okay for things not to be perfect, for our stories to not have endings yet. That's okay. God, help us to help each other. Help us to have honesty. Help us to have authenticity. Help us to have the courage to share what we're going through so that we can all be healthy and so that together we can raise the kids that are a part of this community, that we can raise the next generation to be more loving, to be more filled with compassion, to be kids of mercy and grace and love. Help us to be the kind of people that change this world because we deal with the junk in our lives that has been given to us so we can reject some of that and we can move on into good. And help us to see the good that has been shared with us, the things that have been passed down to us, the things that are meaningful and loving and matter in our lives. Help us to redeem those as blessings. And help us to also pass those along to our kids, to our neighbors, to our communities. It's your name that we pray. Amen.